I can go back and I could give you right here a whole lot of circumstances that happened in my life when I went to my father's grave, but then it turns out that I had all this hatred towards my father for all these years.
Go on through the story, because this is an important story.
Yeah.
Maybe you can share that with us, because I know it was a profound experience in your life.
It truly was.
When was this, first of all?
It was 1974, just before I wrote Erroneous Elms, like months before I wrote Erroneous Elms, like days before I wrote Erroneous Elms.
Had you seen him at any time since he left your family?
Never saw him.
Never saw him?
Never saw him. He did. He left and walked away with on a wife and 3 boys, and never ever showed up again. Just was gone. So, do you want me to tell this story?
Yeah, would you? I think it's very powerful.
It was. I went down to Columbus, Mississippi. I was teaching at St. John's University in Queens. You were 14. No,
that's right.
And it's interesting. I haven't thought of this in quite a while. I had a cousin who was my father's sister's child, whose name was Dorothy Phillips, who I had just met a couple of times. They would never give any information about my father. I was always looking for my father. I spent a lot of time looking for my father.
Why did you want to find him?
I wanted to meet him in a bar. I had a fantasy of just going to a bar and sitting down and saying, "I'm your son. Let me." And this was long before I became well known or anything.
Yes.
This was I just wanted to know who this guy was.
Yeah.
When his mother died, I found out his mother died. I went to the funeral, and I was only 13. I was the only one that went, and I went only because I was hoping that he would show up. Just so I could meet him, but he didn't come.
Wow.
Anyway, I spent a lot of time looking for him. Then I would always run out of money, or I would run out of desire, or I was just being guided to stay away. Because I know now. See, I can just interject that I know now because I have conversations with my father, and I can see my father in my meditations. I mean, his soul is there, and in many ways it guides me. I mean, I really think that his life was a lesson for me in how not to do things. And so I've used it that way, and I see the blessing there. But anyway, 1974 rolls around. I'm 34 years old, and I go down to, I'm invited to go to Columbus, Mississippi to do an investigation of the civil rights legislation that had been just passed in the 60s when Johnson was president, and to see whether some of these colleges in the South were abiding by them. And I was just like a federal consultant, and I would go on campus sort of incognito, and I would sit in classes, and I would write my report, and then I would send it back. And I agreed to do this for a weekend, and Dorothy, meantime, had called and left a message that she said, your father is dead. And I didn't know this up until then.
Wow.
Yeah, she said, your father is dead. He died in New Orleans. And she gave me the date that he died. And she said, he's been dead for a while. And I was shocked. I called my mother. I said, did you know that? I asked my mother. None of us knew that. He'd been dead 7 or 8 years. So I got down to Columbus, and I looked on a map, and I was only 200 miles from New Orleans, and I called the infirmary where she gave me the name of the infirmary. And he was an indigent. And they said they found out that he died of cirrhosis of the liver, and he was 49 years old. And they said, we don't have any record of where his body as an indigent was just shipped to Biloxi, Mississippi. So I said, well, I'm going to Biloxi. I don't know. I mean, I was on a journey then, and this was a spooky time for me, and it gives me that Kundalini feeling right now.
I can see it. I can feel it.
Yeah, I get very teary when I think about it. And I went to the rent-a-car place, the National Rent-A-Car, and there was only one rent-a-car place, and this is a dinky little town in Mississippi, okay, at the Mississippi State College for Women, I think it was. And I went to the rent-a-car place, and they had one car, and the car was a brand new car. It was a 1974 Dodge Coronet, okay, it was a blue, and it had no miles on it. 0.9. I said, what? Did they make this car here? How did this car get here? And that car had been shipped in that day, and I was the first person to drive the car. And it was so new that the plastic was on the seats. All right?
Wow.
And I had to take the plastic off of the covering.
Interesting
on the
metaphor, huh?
Yes. Yeah. So I got in, and there was no seat belt. There was only one seat belt on the right-hand side. There was no left-hand seat belt. And they didn't even have shoulder belts in those days. So I got out of the car, and I took this, because I've got that sort of determination in me that I'm wearing a seat belt. That's all. And I got out of the car, and I took the seat right out of the car and put it on the ground, and there was the other seat belt taped to the floorboard of the car. and it was masking tape was on it. It was wrapped in plastic, the buckle wrapped in all this plastic. There was a rubber band around it, and then it was taped to the floorboard, obviously to protect it from the cutting the upholstery in transit. And I took all of this stuff off of it and unwrapped it and all that, and inside the buckle there's a card, and it says a business card inside the buckle of this brand new car. This is a true story. And it said Candlelight Inn, Biloxi, Mississippi. So I took the card and I just said, that's interesting. I'm going to Biloxi. It's 200 miles away, a 4-hour drive. It was on a Friday afternoon. I put the card in my pocket and I drove down to Biloxi. And I didn't think much about it. In fact, I picked up a hitchhiker on the way and a kid who was, a migrant fruit picker, and I took him someplace else, and I went about an hour out of my way to take him somewhere. And we finally got to Biloxi. I got to Biloxi, and it was about 10 minutes to 5 on Friday afternoon. I think it was the 22nd of August. Reader's Digest did this in a story because, so they checked out every detail of this, okay? I mean, every detail.
Oh.
And I went to the phone book in the gas station outside of Biloxi. When it said, welcome to Biloxi, I went into the next desk, and I just looked under cemeteries. I was just figured he's got to be buried in Biloxi. What else would they do with him, you know? And I didn't realize that I was on a real journey at this time. And I called the first cemetery and there was no answer, and the second one it was busy, and the third one was a real small listing, like it was an inferior cemetery. You know? Maybe they didn't bury them real deep or something, I don't know. But it was like a real tiny list. So I called it, and it turns out it was just a cemetery plot on the back of another piece of property. And an old man came to the phone. And they kept their records in Coca-Cola can boxes. The Coca-Cola can. He had to go back. He said, well, we don't have records here exactly. I said, I want to see if a Melvin Lyle Dyer is buried here. And he was gone for what seemed like an eternity, but he came back and he said, yes. He said, he's buried here. And my heart was just beating as fast as you could imagine. I said, well, how do I get there? I'm in Biloxi and I want to come over there. I really feel like I need this. My father, and I've never met him. And he said, well, I got the death certificate right here. He said, he's buried. He said, your father's buried on the grounds of the Candlelight Inn.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, just find that, and it's just inside of town. And I reached into my pocket. It's a true story.
That's incredible.
And I took the card, and on the back of the card is a map imprinted on how to get to the Candlelight Inn. I mean, it's printed, like it's got these arrows that go to, and I was only 6 blocks away, and I put it back, and that's when I started getting the BGBs, whatever you call them, heebie-jeebies. And I went to the gravesite, and this was in August of 1974, and I stood there. I was 34 years old, and I stood there, and I was sobbing. There was just a little plate on the ground that said Melvin Lyle Dyer. And I sobbed, and I sobbed, and I cried, and I talked, and I was there for 2.5 hours. It was almost like there was magnets on my feet. I couldn't leave. It was till 7:30. In fact, there was no entrance there. I just had to. There was just a chain across there. He asked me. He said, when you leave, just put the chain up across, because they didn't want other vandals and that driving through there. And I left there, and what I did in that time, which was so significant for me, and it's why I think of it as an event that was like an unfolding in my life.
Spiritual awakening.
Yeah, it was a spiritual awakening. It was like I forgave my father. That's what I had to do. And I think of forgiveness. I mean, I've studied this now, and I wrote a whole chapter about it, and you'll see it when you believe it. Forgiveness, Mark Twain had a wonderful definition of it. He said, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. Isn't that beautiful?
Ooh, that is about as beautiful thing I've ever heard. Oh, that's amazing.
And it's like, I think of forgiveness as like a snake bite. You know, it's like you get bit by a snake and you can't unbite yourself. I mean, but nobody ever died from a snake bite. A snake bite doesn't kill you, it's just a bite, you know, and we get bit all the time in all different metaphorical ways. What kills you isn't the bite, it's the venom that circulates after the bite. Well, mentally or metaphysically, the venom that circulates in you after the bite, after the things that have been done to you, is the hatred and the anger and the unforgiveness. And you think of Christ on a cross, and you think of a soldier, remember from King of Kings. I'll never forget that image. And Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What he's really saying there is, they don't know that they're throwing a spear into themselves when they throw a spear into me, that we're all connected, that we're all one. And until you get rid of that venom, it will destroy you. So whatever it was that I was carrying around towards my father, which was being manifested in all kinds of conscious and unconscious ways in my life, I let it go in that moment. And it was like my father was there with me, Tony. I mean, he was just, and he's with me now. I mean, in fact, I can feel his presence here now as we speak. Always saying to me, like, where I am, there's no judgment. Yeah. You know, there's no good or bad here. There's no right or wrong in this. There's just like, tell my story if it's going to help somebody to forgive somebody, you know. And that was my purpose. And every time I do something that is generous and loving and good and helpful to other people, I feel like my Father's smiling on me. And once I forgave him, it's funny because in my life at that time, that's when I was getting divorced. I was going through a struggle. That's when I was overweight, like 25 or 30 pounds. I wasn't running. I didn't start running till the year after that. And my writing was really suffering. I was writing professional article stuff just to publish or perish, okay? That's where I was. I was trying to get published in different professional magazines and all of that kind of thing, and I'd send stuff in. It was just stuff that, you wouldn't want to read because it was just quoting everything else, and it was, the kind of professional stuff that everybody does. They write to each other. Nobody else reads it. And then when you do write something that appears in Family Circle or Reader's Digest or whatever, or even the National Enquirer,
that's right.
5 million people read it. I mean, give me 5 million neurotic people reading the Enquirer to fix.
That's right.
Rather than a whole bunch of people who are just going to write back in another letter to me only in the form of another article. So I let all of that go.